Welcome to the Selfie Seeker Deep Dive, exploring attachment styles in the movies. Because through their stories, you can uncover your own inner patterns. I'm really excited to be kicking off this brand new series, our Selfie Seeker Deep Dive. And this isn't about crafting those perfect online images, you know? It's really about courageously seeking your evolving self, like looking honestly at your inner emotional patterns. And for our very first deep dive, we're jumping into a film that is just, well, it's an absolute masterclass in the intricate, often really messy dance of human connection and disconnection. Mike Nichols' 2004 drama, Closer. Starring Julia Roberts, Jude Law, Natalie Portman, Clive Owen. It's such a raw, unflinching look at love and lust and betrayal. So our mission today really is to use Closer almost like a mirror to help you maybe spot your own attachment patterns without needing to take a single quiz or anything like that. So as we unravel this story together, I really invite you to actively notice your own gut reactions. Watch the film, listen to us talk, and see what comes up. Which characters' choices, or maybe their mistakes, feel kind of uncomfortably familiar? Like, have you been there? Or whose behavior do you find yourself maybe strangely justifying, even when it looks pretty destructive from the outside? That instinctive pull, or, even feeling defensive about a character, that often reveals something pretty profound about your own attachment style. It's like an unconscious recognition, yourself, right there in the story playing out on screen. Now, Closer. It's a film that really demands your attention. It's compelling, yeah, but it can be difficult to watch too. It definitely sets the stage for what we're talking about. So if you haven't seen it yet, we'd really strongly invite you to maybe pause this deep dive right now. Go watch the movie. It's pretty essential to really get the nuances we're about to explore.
The screen tells their story, but the echo is ours. Attachment styles in the movies with Selfie Seeker Deep Dive, because through their stories you can uncover your own inner patterns.
Okay, so maybe you just paused and watched the movie Welcome Back. Or maybe you already know it inside out and you chose to just continue with me. Either way, you're definitely in the right place to start this journey.
And what's really fascinating here, especially thinking about this idea of selfie seeking, is how our unconscious mind just kind of, well, recognizes itself in fiction. It's almost uncanny sometimes. It's like these stories hold up a mirror to these hidden blueprints for love, blueprints that got etched into our minds way back in childhood. And these aren't just vague ideas, they're like invisible scripts. They dictate how we act in relationships, what we're afraid of, and honestly why we so often get trapped in these repeating cycles. Cycles that feel like love maybe, but they can leave us feeling empty or confused or sometimes really hurt.
That hidden blueprint idea is so powerful. It really resonates.
Yeah, and the hidden cost of staying unconscious of these patterns. It's significant. We find ourselves attracting the same kind of emotional dynamics over and over again. We might mistake sheer intensity, that drama, for genuine intimacy, or sometimes even confuse emotional chaos for passion. And this constant repetition, this kind of dance with our unresolved patterns, it can be really devastating to our self-worth over time because we keep hitting the same walls and we just don't understand why.
Right, hitting the same walls without knowing why you built them in the first place.
Yeah.
So can you give us just a quick primer on what these attachment styles actually are for anyone who might be new to this?
Absolutely, yeah. So at its core, John Bowlby's attachment theory, it's basically built on the idea that our earliest relationships, usually with parents or primary caregivers, they form this kind of internal working model, like a template for all our future romantic connections. You can almost think of your infant self as like a little scientist constantly gathering data. Okay, when I cry, do they come? Consistently. When I reach out for comfort, am I held? Am I soothed? The answers to those really fundamental questions, they become your internal guide, your map for how safe and available love feels out there in the world. And from this, 4 primary patterns tend to emerge. They really shape how we approach relationships.
Okay, 4 patterns. What are they?
So the first one, and you could argue it's the ideal, is secure attachment. About 50% of people fall roughly into this category. They're generally comfortable with intimacy and independence. They trust that love is usually available, reliable. They can give affection, receive it pretty easily. It's a stable base.
Okay, secure. That makes sense. What about the others?
Then you have the anxious preoccupied style. That's roughly 20%. These individuals really crave intense closeness, but they're often plagued by fears of abandonment, deep fears. They tend to seek constant reassurance from their partner, and they can become very focused, maybe overly focused, on their partner's responses, their moods, their availability, always scanning.
Scanning. Okay. So constantly looking for reassurance. How is that different from, say, someone who just pulls away from closeness?
Yeah, that's where the next style comes in. The avoidant dismissive. This makes up about 25% of people. These individuals, they really value their independence, sometimes above all else. They tend to suppress their own emotional needs or maybe not even recognize them fully. And they often find intimacy itself kind of suffocating or overwhelming. They might keep partners at arm's length, even if deep down they do desire connection. They learned early on, probably, that relying on others might lead to disappointment or being let down.
So they protect themselves by keeping that distance. Makes sense. And the last one.
And the last one, it's the most complex, really. The fearful avoidant, sometimes called disorganized, it's about 5%. This style is, well, it's a tragic paradox. They desperately want closeness, but they also deeply fear it, often at the exact same time. This creates a real push-pull dynamic in their relationships. They'll draw someone in, feel that tension, then panic floods in, and they push them away. They're caught between this intense longing and this deep terror.
Wow. Wanting and fearing it simultaneously. That sounds incredibly difficult to navigate.
It is. And of course, these percentages, they're approximate, right? People are complex. But this framework gives us a really powerful lens for understanding the characters in Closer. They almost perfectly embody these styles.
Oh, absolutely. And what a film Closer is for this kind of exploration. It's so raw, isn't it? And emotionally devastating at times, but truly, like you said, a masterclass in how these attachment wounds drive us. It just lays bare those relentless push-pull dynamics, the desperate pursuit of someone who's just out of reach, that profound fear of real, genuine intimacy. And how often, my God, how often we confuse sheer intensity, that high drama, with actual deep love.
Exactly. What's so striking in the film is how the characters keep mistaking that emotional electricity, that high-wire act of seduction and betrayal, for some kind of profound connection. But really, like you said before, it's often just two wounded attachment styles colliding, fueled by deceit, the taboo, the chase.
Yeah, that forbidden fruit thing. It creates such a powerful illusion of deep feeling, doesn't it? But it's just an illusion built on shaky ground. Okay, so let's quickly set the stage. A brief storyline overview for anyone who might need a refresher, or maybe just watched it and wants to connect the dots. So it kicks off with the meeting. Dan, he's a struggling writer working on obituaries. He spots Alice across a busy London street, eye contact. Then moments later, fate intervenes. Or maybe it's just chaos and she's hit by a taxi.
And he's right there.
It's right there. He rescues her. This dramatic, almost like movie moment beginning sparks this intense whirlwind relationship between them. Very fast, very consuming. Then we get the temptation. Later on, Dan's at a photo shoot for his novel. And significantly, the novel is based on Alice's life. Huge red flag right there, maybe.
Definitely an attachment behavior in itself, yeah.
Right. And he meets Anna, the photographer. There's this undeniable immediate flirtation, an electric charge. It feels like a projection-based attraction, something exciting and new. This leads kind of bizarrely to the setup. Dan, in a moment of frustration, spite, he gets online, pretends to be Anna in a chat room, and has this really explicit cybersex encounter with a stranger named Larry.
And then he sets them up to meet.
Exactly. He lures Larry to an aquarium, pretending he's Anna meeting him. But of course, Larry meets the real Anna there. And despite these incredibly weird, deceptive circumstances, they somehow start dating.
It's almost unbelievable, but it speaks to the patterns already in play. Maybe Larry's own pursuit, Anna's intrigue.
Yeah. And from this point, all four characters just get tangled up in the entanglements. It becomes this complex, constantly shifting web of romantic triangles, full of betrayals, lies, desperate longing, and this endless reshuffling of partners. It's emotionally exhausting just watching it unfold. Then we get that really stark scene in the strip club. Alice, now working under the alias Jane, is a stripper. And Larry, maybe seeking some kind of twisted control or maybe a transaction he understands, encounters her there.
He tries to possess her through money, through that transaction.
Right. It's a really jarring, uncomfortable scene. Highlights the objectification that's kind of woven through all their relationships. Performing intimacy versus feeling it. This all kind of spirals towards the confessions. Anne and Dan betray their partners, Alice and Larry. Eventually, Anna confesses her affair with Dan to Larry.
And Larry's reaction.
Oh, it's brutal. In this raw display of, like, hurt turning into control, he demands every single excruciating detail, pushing her to describe the intimate acts.
He needs to know everything. It's that hypervigilance, that attempt to own the pain by knowing it all.
And then he bargains. He bargains for one last sexual encounter before he'll agree to a divorce. It's just a truly disturbing moment of emotional manipulation. Chilling. We see the cracks appear really painfully, maybe most clearly, in that heartbreaking scene where Alice is just sobbing. Dan admits he loves Anna, and the reason? Because she doesn't need me.
Ooh, that line.
Devastating. And Alice, just utterly broken, whispers, "How can you do this to someone?" It feels like this echo of some deep childhood trauma, you know? Like maybe the helplessness she felt if a father left her mother in that same kind of destructive way.
That vulnerability is palpable.
Yeah, and the tension just keeps building right up to the airport. Dan, desperate now for control, for certainty, he presses Alice relentlessly. He needs her to admit she was intimate with Larry.
He's pushing and pushing.
And her response is just simple, heartbreaking, final. She looks at him and says she no longer loves him. Done.
It feels like the culmination of her fearful avoidant pattern, maybe. That self-protective cutoff. Or perhaps you could argue it's an evolved response, a necessary boundary after his violation.
Maybe both. And finally, the ending. Larry and Anna, in this kind of twisted return to what's familiar, they reunite. Maybe not happily ever after, but together. Dan lingers at that memorial plaque for Alice Ayres, the name Alice borrowed. And he finally seems to realize the painful truth. He never actually knew the woman he claimed to love. Not really.
He loved the idea, the story he created.
Exactly. And the real Alice, revealed as Jane Jones, walks alone through New York. She shed her costume or aliases, maybe shedding that toxic dynamic she was trapped in, walking into her own truth, perhaps.
It's a brutal narrative, isn't it? But that's precisely why it's such a rich, emotional laboratory for us. Each of these characters, in their deeply flawed humanity, they really do act as mirrors, reflecting patterns that can be, well, uncomfortably familiar for many of us. Let's delve into them one by one.
Okay, let's start our character deep dive with Dan, played by Jude Law. He feels like such a textbook example of a validation seeker, doesn't he? Deeply entrenched in that anxious, preoccupied attachment style.
Absolutely. What really drives Dan underneath it all is this deep-seated fear, a fear of not being enough, not being worthy, unless someone absolutely relies on him, unless he's needed.
Yeah, his whole pattern seems to be pulling close by rescuing, making himself indispensable. And then the moment that sense of being needed is threatened or he feels rejected, he just panics, often resorts to pretty desperate measures.
You see it right from the very beginning, that opening scene. Alice gets hit by the car, and Dan doesn't just want to help her. You feel like he needs to be her hero, her rescuer.
Right.
Her vulnerability, her need in that moment, it makes him feel significant, purposeful. It's almost like this unspoken bargain, and I'll save you if you make me feel whole. It validates his existence.
It really makes you wonder about the roots of that kind of pattern. What sort of childhood environment could foster that?
Well, it often stems from experiences of conditional love. Perhaps he had a parent or parents who subtly or maybe even overtly communicated that approval came from being useful, from managing a parent's crisis or always putting their needs first. Be the good boy, fix things. Or conversely, maybe emotional withdrawal was used as a punishment. So he learned very early on that love was precarious, fragile, that it had to be earned through constant striving, constant effort, and, crucially, by being needed. His worth wasn't inherent, it was based on his function.
Wow. So his writing that novel, the one based entirely on Alice's life, that isn't just a creative outlet then, it's almost an extension of that anxious need, a way to kind of possess her narrative, her story, and by doing that, validate his own existence.
That's a very sharp observation.
Yeah.
He's not just documenting her life, he's attempting to solidify his place in her story, to make himself eternally indispensable through his art, through defining her. It's a form of control, really.
And then his online deception, posing as Anna in that chat room.
Oh, yeah. That's pure anxious attachment playing out, isn't it? It's an outlet for all his unmet needs, maybe his frustrations as a failed or struggling novelist. He's seeking to feel needed, desired, powerful, even if it's through manipulation and fantasy. It's about getting that hit of validation however he can.
Okay, but then his pursuit of Anna, she seems more distant, more independent than Alice initially. That feels almost counterintuitive if his core need is to be needed. What's going on there?
Ah, yes. The classic anxious paradox. You see it all the time. Alice's more straightforward need for him after that initial rescue, it probably starts to feel almost too easy, too predictable, maybe even a bit boring for his activated system.
Right.
Anna's distance, her unavailability, her initial coolness that triggers his deepest fear, the fear that he's not inherently valuable or desirable. So her validation, precisely because it seems hard-won, would prove something about his worth in a way that Alice's more open affection never could. He's chasing the challenge, the uncertainty.
So it's not really love, it's attachment panic driving him towards her.
Exactly. His entire self-worth gets tangled up in winning her over, in conquering that distance. It's less about Anna as a person and more about what winning her represents for his own fragile sense of self.
And when he finally confesses the affair to Alice, watching that scene, it feels less about genuine remorse for the pain he's causing her, and much more about relieving his own internal turmoil. He seems to be almost seeking reassurance from her reaction to his confession.
Absolutely. It's incredibly self-centered, even in confession. And then that line when he tells Alice he loves Anna because she doesn't need me, that is the central tragic irony of his anxious attachment.
Right.
Her initial need drew him in, gave him purpose. But Anna's perceived independence, her not needing him, created that intoxicating uncertainty, that challenge that he mistook for profound connection.
And at the airport, at the very end, when he's desperately pleading, "But I love you," after Alice has just clearly stated she no longer loves him.
Yeah, that's the classic anxious belief, isn't it? That his feelings should somehow determine hers, that his love should be enough to compel hers. He's relentlessly pushing, almost forcing her hand, and ultimately just confirming his deepest fear. That his love, his presence, isn't enough to hold someone. That he is, in fact, abandonable.
It's heartbreaking to watch him create his own worst nightmare. So for you listening, if Dan's actions, his patterns, are ringing any bells, the question to maybe ask yourself is, do you often find yourself making yourself indispensable as proof of your worth in relationships? Is being needed crucial to your sense of value?
And moving from Dan's desperate need for validation, let's turn our mirror now to Alice, or perhaps we should say Jane, played so compellingly by Natalie Portman. She really embodies the intimacy paradox, a classic fearful avoidance style.
Yeah, definitely. What truly drives Alice deep down, it feels like this profound fear of being abandoned if she's ever fully known, if the mask slips.
Exactly. Her pattern is so clear. She pulls close, she initiates intimacy, sometimes quite intensely, but then almost inevitably she withdraws, either through lies, creating distance, or literally leaving. It's a defense mechanism, absolutely.
Yeah.
She oscillates constantly between reaching for that connection she craves and throwing up a protective shield around herself. It's a really heartbreaking internal conflict.
So painful to watch. Where might that come from? What kind of childhood roots lead to that kind of push-pull?
It often stems from experiences of deeply inconsistent caregiving. You might imagine a parent or caregiver who was intensely loving and present one moment and then completely unavailable, frightening, maybe even rejecting or abusive the next. Chaos instead of predictability.
Okay.
So the child learns that love and pain are intertwined. That vulnerability, opening yourself up, feels like a setup for profound hurt or sudden loss. Love becomes associated with danger.
You see that so clearly right from the start, don't you? That hospital scene, just after the accident when she first meets Dan. She allows his help, she accepts that initial intimacy, lets him in briefly, but almost immediately she covers her vulnerability with that sharp wit, that kind of cynical humor.
Yes, it's that dance, showing a flicker of need but masking it instantly, almost regretting the brief moment of openness, pulling the guard back up.
And even later, when she overhears Dan and Anna flirting at the photo shoot, you see the hurt flash across her face. She's clearly wounded by the betrayal. But how does she re-enter the room? Not with tears, but with that command. Just take a picture of me, get snappy.
Right. Vulnerability disguised as a demand, as humor, as control. It's her way of regaining composure and creating distance when she feels threatened. And her very name, the fact she uses Alice instead of her real name, Jane, that's not just a simple lie, is it? It's a profound protective buffer.
It's like borrowing an identity.
Exactly. Trying on a costume so that if Alice gets rejected, maybe Jane is still safe underneath. It avoids the ultimate risk of being rejected as her true core self.
And that line she delivers, I think it's hilarious. "I don't love you anymore. Goodbye." And earlier maybe implied, "I never leave unless I don't love them anymore." That feels like such a moment of terrifying vulnerability, but also our core survival strategy laid bare.
Absolutely. It reveals everything, doesn't it? Leaving first before you can be left is safer. It's about maintaining some semblance of control in a world that has likely felt chaotic and out of control, especially emotionally. It's a preemptive strike against inevitable pain.
And this strip club scene with Larry as Jane, she's performing intimacy, but there's no real vulnerability there, is there? She's detached, provocative maybe,
No.
but it feels like she's maintaining control by offering the illusion of access, the physical proximity, the dance, while remaining fundamentally unreachable emotionally.
A tragic demonstration of her core fear playing out, offering the body, withholding the self.
And that final airport scene where she declares she no longer loves Dan, it's so stark, so final. It really feels like her fearful avoidance system has just won. The love, maybe it was real once, but it's genuinely dissolved under the pressure, under the betrayals. She acts with this finality that is so characteristic of someone protecting themselves from that ultimate abandonment.
And revealing her real name, Jane Jones, only at the very point of departure. It's like the ultimate vulnerability, the ultimate truth, but offered only when it no longer matters to the relationship. She's shedding the costume, yes, but also the connection itself.
Wow. Okay, so for those listening, if Alice's behavior, that push-pull, resonated with you, perhaps ask yourself, do you tend to test love? Maybe by leaving first, emotionally or physically, or by hiding significant parts of your true self, fearing what might happen if you were ever fully, truly known.
Heavy questions, but important ones.
Definitely. Okay, next up, Anna, Julia Roberts' character. She really seems to embody the fortress of independence, doesn't she? A classic dismissive avoidance style. Her core fear feels like it's about losing her independence, her sense of self, through too much closeness.
That's a perfect description. This often manifests as offering presence without true vulnerability. She can be there physically, even engagingly, but there is a barrier. She might speak her truth, often quite directly, but sometimes without much tenderness, prioritizing that blunt honesty over emotional connection or the other person's feelings.
Yes, she maintains this composed, almost professional distance. Even in intimate moments, it's like she's always observing the relationship, maybe even herself within it, rather than fully merging or immersing herself.
And that kind of emotional distance in adulthood, it almost always points back to childhood roots, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It strongly suggests a childhood where perhaps emotional distance from caregivers was the norm, or maybe where she was explicitly or just implicitly discouraged from showing need, from being too emotional.
She likely learned very early on that emotional safety, maybe even survival, lies in self-sufficiency, in never needing anyone too much. This becomes a core part of her identity, something she prides herself on.
You see this so clearly during that first photo shoot with Dan. She flirts. She definitely engages with him, but she maintains her professional composure throughout. She's present, she's captivating, absolutely, but not truly available emotionally. She's engaging, but without investing the full weight of her emotional self. It's contained.
And her ambivalence during the affair with Dan is so telling. She clearly desires him, the excitement, the escape perhaps, but she clings to Larry's security, the stability he represents, however flawed. Her choices always seem driven by this internal conflict between anxiety and avoidance, never by a clear, wholehearted emotional pull towards one person.
And her attractions to both Dan and Larry, they seem ultimately about maintaining control, don't they? It's like she chooses men who want more from her emotionally than she's truly willing, or maybe able, to give. That ensures she stays in the emotional driver's seat.
Precisely. It's a subconscious strategy to avoid being overwhelmed, either by someone else's needs, or maybe even by her own buried longing for a connection she simultaneously fears.
And when Larry confronts her about the affair, her mask of composure finally cracks. But even then, her honesty, agreeing to his demand for sex before the divorce, it feels like she's giving him what he demands, the details, her body. But you sense this profound disconnect from her own emotions, like she's treating even these incredibly intimate experiences as transactions she can just compartmentalize and control, separate boxes.
Yeah. And Dan's rage, when he learns about this later, it isn't just jealousy, is it? It's like this dawning recognition of Anna's fundamental unreachability. Her fortress of independence, the very thing that might have initially attracted him with its challenge, ultimately makes real, raw, vulnerable intimacy impossible with her.
Right. And her return to Larry at the end.
Okay.
It doesn't feel like a grand romantic reunion. It feels more like choosing the familiar discomfort, the known quantity, over the terrifying unknown of genuine emotional risk and vulnerability with someone else, or maybe even with yourself.
And Larry's controlling nature, paradoxically, it almost serves her avoidance system. because his need for control means she never has to truly choose vulnerability herself. The relationship's dynamics are dictated externally by his demands, allowing her to remain somewhat detached within it.
So for you, our listener, if Anna's approach, her coolness, her self-reliance, made a strange kind of sense to you, ask yourself, do you pride yourself on self-sufficiency, maybe sometimes push people away, yet perhaps secretly long for a closeness that you struggle to allow or sustain?
And that brings us finally to Larry, Clive Owen's intense portrayal. He's the anxious controller. Now, this is a different, often more aggressive expression of that anxious, preoccupied attachment we saw in Dan, but with this really strong, hyper-vigilant element.
Oh yeah, hypervigilant is the word. Larry's core fear feels like it's about sudden, unexpected abandonment. And his pattern is just always reading the room, scanning for shifts, trying desperately to control intimacy, to nail it down.
You can just feel the tension radiating off him, can't you? His childhood roots, you'd guess, must have involved some kind of early unpredictability. Maybe love or safety or attention could just disappear without warning. So constant vigilance, constant monitoring became his survival mechanism. It's deeply ingrained.
You see it playing out constantly. From the very start, he jumps into that intense intimacy online. Then he arrives at the aquarium, basically expecting a sexual rendezvous, not just a casual first date. He's trying to fast forward to possession.
But the instant he senses Anna pulling back even slightly, becoming distant, his anxious system just lights up. You can almost see him recalibrating, adjusting his responses, trying to read her emotional temperature, desperately trying to regain control of the interaction.
His hypervigilance is exhausting just to witness. Remember the art studio. He visibly loses focus, gets agitated when Dan and Anna linger outside talking. Yep. And when he returns from his trip to New York, the first thing he clocks is that Anna is bathed and dressed when maybe she shouldn't be. And immediately it's, why are you dressed? Is everything okay? He's constantly monitoring for threats, for any sign of impending abandonment.
He even directly voices that fear, doesn't he? He says it to Anna, you're going to leave me. Yeah. He's constantly anticipating rejection, almost projecting it, maybe even provoking it through his intense questioning and possessiveness.
And all his attempts to hold on to Anna, bringing those expensive shoes as gifts, like he's trying to buy her loyalty or prove his worth.
Or confessing to sleeping with a sex worker himself, which feels like this desperate, maybe punitive act of trying to regain control or even the moral high ground in a twisted way.
Right. They're all anxious strategies, aren't they? Even paying for sex, both with the sex worker and trying to with Alice Jane.
Right.
It feels like this anxious attempt to control intimacy, to dictate the terms, to try and buy connection, or at least compliance.
Absolutely. And his interrogation of Anna about her affair, it's one of the most chilling scenes in the film, I think. His rage is clearly masking profound heartbreak, but he channels it into demanding these microscopic details. He's trying to transform his utter helplessness into some kind of emotional ownership through knowledge.
Believing that if he knows every single detail, he can somehow control the narrative, control her, maybe even retroactively prevent the abandonment that terrifies him most.
Exactly. It's crucial to see that his controlling behaviors are not avoidant like Anna's distance. They are an anxious strategy born from overwhelming insecurity and the terror of being left. It stems from the same core wound as Dan's neediness. It's just expressed with a much more aggressive, possessive, controlling edge.
Wow. So if Larry's intensity, his jealousy, his need for control, if any of that felt strangely justified or maybe uncomfortably familiar to you as you watched, the question to reflect on is, do you sometimes confuse vigilance with intimacy? Do you believe that knowing everything or controlling every aspect of a relationship is the only way to keep someone close?
Heavy stuff, but so important to unpack.
Definitely. Okay, let's try and connect some of these dots now, because what Closer does so brilliantly is bring the nuances into sharp focus. Especially like you mentioned, how we see those two very different faces of anxious attachment, Dan and Larry.
Yes, that's such a crucial insight from this film. They share that same core wound, that fundamental fear of abandonment. But they express their anxiety in dramatically different ways, ways that are ultimately equally destructive to intimacy.
Right. So Dan externalizes his anxiety through, like, neediness.
Yeah.
Through becoming the rescuer, craving to be needed. He's constantly seeking validation by making himself indispensable through his actions, his words, even his art.
Exactly. Whereas Larry externalizes his anxiety through control, through interrogation, through hypervigilance, through possessiveness. He seeks security by monitoring, by dominating, by trying to own the other person emotionally and sometimes even physically.
And the really key point, the devastating irony, is that both of these strategies, despite looking so different on the surface, ultimately tend to create the very abandonment they're trying so desperately to prevent. Their actions, their intensity, their demands, they push people away.
Yeah.
They end up fulfilling their own deepest fears.
Mm-hmm. It's the tragic self-fulfilling prophecy of insecure attachment. And this brings us right back to that profound concept of the forbidden fruit in unconscious attraction. Something Closer just illustrates so powerfully, scene after scene. Each character, operating from their deeply wounded state, finds themselves drawn not to what is genuinely healthy or stable or good for them, but drawn to what they cannot have. Drawn to the intrigue, the challenge, the drama, and they mistake that initial electric spark, that intensity, for profound, destined connection.
It's so true. It's like Dan is addicted to chasing unavailability. The harder Anna is to get, the more he wants her. Alice seems to seek rescuers, like Dan initially, but ultimately fears true intimacy, so she inevitably pulls away or sabotages things.
And Anna desires connection, maybe even commitment, but often seems most drawn to it when it's outside her current relationship, the thrill of the taboo, the affair. And Larry tries to dominate whatever resists him. He seems to find the most compelling kind of love in something he has to fight for, possess, or control.
Yeah. They're all driven by these unconscious patterns, aren't they? Not by a healthy sense of self or genuine, grounded desire for partnership. True intimacy, the kind that actually fosters growth and security and mutual respect, it requires a level of wholeness and self-awareness that these characters are, frankly, actively avoiding throughout the film. They're just dancing in the shadows of their unhealed wounds.
Beautifully put, dancing in the shadows. And here's where it gets really fascinating and also quite devastating when we look closely at that airport scene again, where love seems to just evaporate, die on the spot. Alice's declaration that she no longer loves Dan. It isn't just a simple, fearful, avoidant retreat, though it includes elements of that. It connects to something psychologists sometimes call narrative contamination.
Narrative contamination. Okay, tell me more about that. That sounds intense.
It is. It's a profound and often overlooked point in understanding relationship endings, especially traumatic ones. You see, Alice, as someone likely operating from a fearful, avoidant place, had probably constructed a kind of livable story in her mind after Dan's betrayal. A way to compartmentalize it, maybe minimize it so she could continue to function, perhaps even continue to love him or try to rebuild trust.
Okay, a coping mechanism. Compartmentalizing to survive it.
Exactly. But Dan, in that airport scene, driven by his own needs, his need for confession, maybe absolution, maybe just control, he insisted on revealing graphic, intrusive details about his encounter with Larry. Details she explicitly did not ask for and likely did not want to hear.
He prioritized his need to confess over her emotional boundary, her capacity to cope.
Precisely. It was a profound violation of emotional consent. For fearful avoidance, as we discussed, compartmentalization is a survival mechanism. It's how they manage overwhelming feelings. Dan, by forcing this unwanted graphic information on her, forced an integration of experiences, of images, that her system couldn't neurologically metabolize. It made continued attachment to him, continued positive feeling, fundamentally impossible.
So it's not just a bad memory then. It's like the core story of their relationship, the narrative, got corrupted, poisoned by these intrusive images, making any future intimacy unthinkable.
That's exactly it. Image corruption. It poisons the well. And Dan's supposed honesty in that moment, it actually reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of love's protective function. Not all truths serve connection, especially when they're delivered cruelly or without considering the impact on the other person. Sometimes restraint is the more loving act.
Wow. That adds such a deep layer to that scene. So Alice, by finally leaving, she's reclaiming her agency after that violation.
Yes. And revealing her real name, Jane Jones, is her ultimate act of self-preservation and truth. But significantly, as we noted, it only happens at the moment of departure, as she sheds the Alice costume, sheds Dan, and steps into an unknown future alone. It's a powerful statement of self, reclaimed, but also reflects how deeply she was pushed to protect herself, maybe even isolate herself in the end.
Okay. Wow. Lots to think about there. So as you've been listening to us really dive deep into these characters and their dynamics, I just want to invite you again to pause and reflect for a moment. What have you been feeling as we talked? Which character's choices did you find yourself maybe defending, even just a little bit, perhaps unconsciously, whose behavior felt a little too close to home, maybe stirred up some discomfort or recognition? And thinking about your own life, your own relationships, when have you perhaps reacted in similar ways, maybe without fully understanding why at the time?
And ultimately, what does this reflection reveal about how you tend to approach closeness? or how you handle conflict, disagreement, vulnerability, your instinctive pull towards one character, or your defensiveness, or even your judgment of another. That often holds the key. It reveals something about your own attachment style. Pay close attention to those reactions, those little pings of recognition or discomfort, because they can really illuminate parts of ourselves we might prefer not to acknowledge. It's not about judgment. It's really an opportunity for deep self-reflection and understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's try and make this even more direct, maybe explore it further.
Yeah.
If Dan's patterns felt particularly familiar to you, do you often find yourself hungry for validation? Are you sometimes drawn to partners who seem emotionally unavailable, maybe recreating that chase? Do you often feel unappreciated unless you're being indispensable? Or maybe struggle to set and maintain healthy boundaries, saying yes when you mean no?
Or, if Alice's behavior resonated more strongly, do you experience that intense push-pull dynamic in your relationships? Wanting closeness desperately, then feeling the urge to flee? Do you struggle with deep vulnerability, maybe keeping significant secrets? Or do you find yourself subtly, or not so subtly, testing partners to see if they'll really stay, if they can handle all of you?
And if Anna's approach, her cool self-sufficiency, made a kind of sense to you,
Yeah.
are you often perceived by others as maybe hard to read or emotionally distant? Do you highly value your independence, perhaps sometimes to the exclusion of genuine interdependent closeness? Are you uncomfortable with intense emotional displays, either your own or others? Or do you tend to retreat physically or emotionally when intimacy starts to feel too demanding or overwhelming?
And finally, if Larry's intensity, his controlling tendencies, felt somehow justified or maybe just uncomfortably familiar, do you experience overwhelming jealousy or possessiveness in relationships? Do you find yourself trying to control situations or your partner needing constant reassurance or information to feel secure? Is vigilance, that constant scanning for threats, a core part of how you try to maintain connection and keep someone close? And just stepping back for a moment, on a deeper, almost biological level, it's really worth noting something crucial about our nervous system when relationships end, especially intense ones. When a deep bond breaks, our nervous system actually loses familiar rhythms. Our bodies, our systems become accustomed to co-regulating with another person, matching their breathing patterns, syncing with their presence, their emotional state. It happens unconsciously.
Co-regulation, right?
Yes. And this can make the absence, the breakup, feel incredibly overwhelming. It's almost like a physical withdrawal because your nervous system is literally recalibrating, searching for that familiar regulation that's suddenly gone.
So it's not just all in your head.
Not at all. It's a real physiological response. This is why when a breakup happens, it's not just emotional heartbreak. It's often a profound physical disruption, too. It helps explain why the pain feels so all-consuming and why letting go can feel almost impossible sometimes. Your body is literally missing the other person's regulatory presence.
That concept of co-regulation is so important. And if you happen to be navigating a breakup right now, just understanding this piece can be truly transformative, I think. It helps make sense of why the pain feels so deep, maybe why you literally can't stop thinking about them. We actually have a suggested video resource that dives much deeper into this specific nervous system concept, explaining the why behind that post-breakup obsession. It's called "This is Why You Can't Stop Thinking About Them After a Breakup." We really invite you to check it out if that resonates with what you're going through right now. It might offer some comfort and clarity. But let's bring it back to the beautiful truth about recognition, about seeing these patterns in closer or in ourselves, seeing yourself reflected in Dan or Alice or Anna or Larry. It isn't a diagnosis. It's definitely not a life sentence. It's truly the beginning of freedom. Those past relationships, even the really painful ones, they weren't failures. You can choose to see them as attempts, maybe unconscious attempts, to resolve unfinished emotional business, to play out those hidden blueprints we talked about, hoping for a different ending. The journey towards healthier, more secure love really begins with developing what we call earned security. That means learning to soothe your own attachment fears, to meet your own needs more effectively, rather than relying solely on your partners to regulate you or validate you.
Mm-hmm. And the path to that earned security, it looks a bit different depending on your starting point, your primary style. For individuals leaning towards an anxious attachment, like Dan or Larry in their different ways, it means learning to self-validate, finding your worth internally, building self-esteem that isn't dependent on external approval or being needed. For more avoidant individuals, like Anna, the work is often about courageously practicing vulnerability, allowing yourself, bit by bit, to lean into healthy interdependence, to express needs, to tolerate closeness without shutting down. And for the fearful avoidant, like Alice, the journey often involves learning to stay present with discomfort, tolerating the anxiety that closeness brings without fleeing, And gradually, cautiously rebuilding trust in others, yes, but fundamentally trust in yourself to handle emotional risk. It's about consciously, actively rewriting those old fear-based scripts.
And this whole process, this transformative recognition and the work that follows, that's precisely what makes you a selfie seeker in the way we mean it. Not someone seeking external validation through curated images on social media, but someone courageously seeking their evolving, authentic self through the honest examination of their inner patterns, their reactions, their relationship dynamics. The selfie seeker uses characters like Dan, Alice, Anna, or Larry as essential waypoints on their own emotional map. They ask the powerful questions. Okay, if I recognize myself in this character's struggle, where is this pattern trying to take me? What unmet need is it pointing to? And how can I consciously choose to evolve beyond its limitations?
It's about seeing the potential for growth within the pattern itself. Dan's anxious pursuit of external validation can evolve into a deep, embodied understanding of his inherent worth, regardless of relationship status. Alice's fearful retreat from intimacy can transform into the courage to stay present, to communicate needs, and to allow genuine connection, even when it feels scary. Anna's protected, defended distance can soften into the wisdom to risk authentic closeness, to find the balance between independence and intimacy. And Larry's controlling grip, born of fear, can eventually loosen into trusting love, trusting connection, without the desperate need to possess or dominate.
Exactly. The goal isn't necessarily to eliminate these patterns entirely. They're often deeply ingrained, parts of our human experience, our survival strategies. But it's about becoming conscious of them, understanding them, choosing how or if they serve you now, and gaining the wisdom and the tools to actively grow beyond their limitations when they no longer do. So as we close out this very first Selfie Seeker Deep Dive, just remember, the characters we've wrestled with today in Closer, in all their messy humanity, they are powerful mirrors. Recognition, seeing yourself reflected, even if it's uncomfortable, is truly the first most crucial step toward profound, lasting change in how you relate to yourself and to others.
And perhaps this raises a final provocative thought for you to sit with. The profound and sometimes difficult truth is that we don't just attract what we consciously want in love. We tend to attract who we are at our current level of emotional development, at our current level of healing. So if you truly desire to attract love that reflects who you are becoming, rather than simply repeating the patterns of who you've been, the most essential transformative work must always start within yourself. The love story you've maybe been trying to write through other people, through seeking it externally in these intense, often painful dynamics, that story can finally truly begin with the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one you cultivate with yourself.